Hello, good morning. This is Lee. Welcome to ArtCat. It's live again on Saturday, 2 o'clock British time, GMT, BST, whatever it is. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. We're going to carry on the same old thing. Every Saturday, we do a bit of live drawing, a bit of live chat. So hopefully everything is working well and you can all hear me. Oh, look at that. A slight delay, so I'm going to plug that in. Hopefully everything's linked in okay. I'll flip over to the drawing cam because that's always a little bit easier. There seems to be a bit of a time delay between me speaking and the sound coming through, so hopefully this is all linked up okay. I'm going to flick over to another screen so I can see you properly, and there you go. So, got a couple of people watching already, so when you come in you can type hello, just so I know you're there. As you can see on screen, we have a book, or this front cover of a book. It says How to Draw Portraits in Charcoal, and it's something I got this week, and I've been looking through, and it's got some great advice in there and a great breakdown of some of the techniques that I use on a regular basis. But also got me thinking about the style of work that I do and some of the elements that I'd like to bring into my work, and I've decided to try and not necessarily loosen up a bit, because sometimes when you say I want to loosen up a bit, I want to get a bit more abstract, I think my focus was on the refinement, so much so it taking me away from the content of the picture. And there's always a balance between technique and composition and your concept, and there's an element that I'd like to try and bring back into my work, which is a much more sculptural element, which is my background. My background is in fine craft design. I specialised in ceramics, and I was very used to making things with my hands. We were taught though during our course to draw an awful lot, to figure out what things were in 3 dimensions, so when we went to go and make it, we could have a better idea 3-dimensionally about what it was we needed to create. And so my drawing took on an element of sculpture to it. It was much more carving into the page, you know, by laying down forms and things. And I kind of was reviewing my own drawing methods and my own drawing style, and also books and things that I could get draw a source of inspiration from. And I came across his book, Portraits in Charcoal, purely simply because I've been drawing a lot in charcoal recently. So when it just popped up, I kind of looked at it, and there was a connection between some of the things I was trying to aim for. So I started to look through a couple of the pages, and it did touch on a lot of the basics that I've been teaching about drawing lightly to begin with, and finding the structure first, the architecture of the drawing, where you're going to place it in the compositions and things like that. But this was very much, well, some of the images definitely had a very much more lively approach to them, more definite and defined, more graphic in some circumstances, but very subtle in others. And the drawing style still had lots of information, but with a simplicity to it, which I quite liked. And what I'd like to add to that level is a mix of both the detail and the abstract, and place these things together that they produce a very cohesive portrait, and something that I've kind of been thinking about in my own artwork. So I have brought this book this week, and I decided to sort of highlight it a little bit. It's some great images in the book, and he does break it down to very simple terms. And for anybody starting out, it might seem overwhelming at first, but certainly as you go through it, and if you work through some of the working exercises and look at some techniques and some of the things how he explains it, are very easily absorbed, that you can start to apply them to the types of things that you want to draw. Now, it might be that you are a landscape painter, or that you like still lives, but I think you can use certain elements of the approach in your work, and also in lots of other mediums. It's not necessarily just for charcoal, although obviously as the book describes, it says Portraits in Charcoal. That's basically what it is, you know, it is what it says on the tin basically. But it is a lovely book. It's by Nathan Folks. I don't know if I can hold it up there so you can see I have got the real thing in my hand. So I want to give a bit of a nod to that. I'll put links to the book. We can get it. I put links up on Amazon, and there's a small kickback to me. You don't pay anything extra. Basically, if I put a link up and you click on it and you like it and then you get it, I will get a small percentage back. It's not very much. So I just wanted to be clear about that. But you can buy this in a bookshop if you need to, or any local store that you feel that you need to. But there are some lovely images in there, and so today what I was going to do is try to recreate one of these images. There's the details of the book up there in front of you. How to draw portraits in charcoal. I will just make that disappear a little bit. So, where are we? Image. Get the right image because I don't want the wrong thing to disappear. That one. Make that disappear. It's just so we're going to be concentrating on the image on the right hand side. Now we'll go through some of the processes that he uses in the book, but maybe add a little bit to it as well as we go along, just in the explanation of what it is I'm actually physically doing on the board. As you can see, I've got my drawing page set up on the drawing board. Also, what I'll say to you is, if you like to, you can share this broadcast on your Facebook page. You can share it with your friends who might be interested in drawing as well. You can click like, you can subscribe to the channel. Basically, you'll get a notification basically to say this is going live and there's another video that I've uploaded, and you can watch it at your leisure. It's an easy way to find it. But if you share it, you click the share button. You can then click to share it on your favorite Facebook page or Twitter page or whichever social media outlet you use. It'll load it up onto your page for you. It'll come up straight away, and you can then just share it. Let's say post to Facebook or post to Twitter. It'll pop up for you. So it's really easy to do. If you do that, more people watch it, the bigger the community grows, the more questions that will be asked, and you can bounce off of each other as well. So when you do join the chat room, say hello. There's lots of people who turn up on a regular basis, which is always nice to see. And the questions that you generally have about your artwork might be something that somebody else has about theirs, and they might not be willing to or feel confident enough to type it out on screen. So if you ask a question, it'll generally answer a lot of people's problems and issues as well. If there's something you're stuck on personally and you want to ask me something specific about your own artwork, an issue or problem that you have, please do. Don't think because I'm working on this that you can't ask anything art related at all. Something that you're thinking about. It could be something about that's been in the media, or I mean, recently it's the Maggie Hamblin sculpture that's gone up, and you might want to ask about that. Whatever it is, we can have a discussion, because this isn't just me telling you what to do. This is a chat. That's why it's called ArtCat. It's a chat art tutor. So we have a chat, do a bit of art, and hopefully I can tutor you along the way. So yeah, I'm going to pop this on my Facebook page. I always put this up on my Facebook page as well. So it's Lee Boyd Artist on Facebook. So if you can't find me on YouTube for any reason, if you go to there every Saturday morning, you should find me. So I'm going to click on the page that I manage, scroll down to my Lee Boyd Artist page, and then post it up there as well. So now that's done, all ahead of the game. See, I'll drift out of the way. This is like a two-way camera, so hello. It's just so I can communicate and talk to you directly, but also you can see what I'm doing in real time as well. Hopefully that's okay for you. I do like to go over to my YouTube. Alex, good morning to you. So nice to see a friendly face to say hello to. We've got 3 people now, so there's somebody else watching. If you are that other person, you can say hello. This is live, so it's always nice to know who's in the room with you. So yeah, I'm going to work on this book. Going to be working predominantly in charcoal. Might work a little bit in pan pastel, just simply because it's a lovely graphic image medium to use. It's very flexible, as in you can put heavy darks in, the very sort of dense blacks to put in. Often when you're working in charcoals initially, it can be quite grainy. With pan pastel, it normally gives you a lovely black finish to your surface. I'm working on a heavyweight paper. It's about 200 GSM, so it's a quite heavy duty cartridge paper. It's because I might be scribbling onto it and building up some textures, and if I'm layering up on top of a paper, I want to know that the paper's got to hold onto the charcoal. You might be working on a different surface. Don't worry, this is more about the process than it is necessarily using a white background. You might want to use a toned background and layer in a white chalk to give you some of the intense highlights that might be on the picture. So yeah, let's get started. Often it's very intimidating when you start on a white page thinking, oh, where do I start? It's really difficult. I don't know where to, do you start at the top? Do you start at the bottom? Basically, just to help me out to begin with, I like to orientate my image to the page that I've got. So obviously I've got mine in portrait format, rather than it being horizontal, being what they call landscape. And I'm looking at the image and can see that roughly the head just come right very close to the top. Now it's not over here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this in a second. There's like time delay between me doing something and you seeing it. I think you can just about see the top of the page on screen. You can. Good. So it's about there, the top of the page. You can see on your screen. And her head is literally almost touching. So I'm just going to make a little mark just there. Nothing bigger than that. There is a large expanse of black that comes down this side. And you can see how lightly, it might even not show up on the screen, but I'm drawing really lightly just to give myself some marks, just to get the big forms, the formats of where this whole image is going to be placed. So I'm not trying to guess where to start and stop. As you can see, my head's twitching backwards and forwards because I'm looking at the image, looking at my page. This little mark that cuts back into the back of a head. Now that isn't halfway down the page, it's a little bit further up. It's about there, and it cuts back down this way. I'm trying to get the angles right. Now often you see, if you watch a comedy sketch and it's about an artist doing life drawing, they have somebody stood there and they're doing this. And it looks really cool because we can identify, oh, that's an artist doing his drawing. But if that's not explained to you, you don't know what this actually means. It's a way of measuring. Your arm is constant. It's a constant unit of measuring, because if you have it out straight, it doesn't suddenly grow or shrink. It's a constant length. So from your eye to your image, you can use your pencil to gauge where things are. So I could place my eye, or the tip of the pencil, against one side of the head and slide my thumb to where the width of the other side is and transfer that to my page. Now you'll get a shrinkage in that respect. Desiree, good morning. Good to see you. So we've got 3 people watching there. There's somebody quietly hiding in the background. So it's one way of measuring and transferring that over. Also, you can use it to place your pencil against certain angles. So I might use the angle of, say, the angle of her head. So I might place the angle of the pencil along her forehead, the length of her nose, her chin, and transfer that angle to my page. So I then can see where her face aligns, coming down this way. Now it's very easy subconsciously to try and turn the head so it's looking straight at you. Often people draw a beautiful position of the head, 3/4 looking away, looking down, but all the details that they put on the head will suddenly have a format like they're looking straight at you. Obviously, if the head is pointing in one direction, the rest of the things on the head have to point in the same direction as well. So we've got this image of where the head's coming out. I can't have the chin come way down here because that's down below the halfway of the page. And this little bit where it kinks back in at the back of her head is almost in line with the bottom of her chin. So I know that's roughly where the chin's going to be. So it's just a way of placing little marks on your drawing surface as to where to start off with. You've got your best guesstimate, which is aided by a little bit of measuring, as to where the format of your forms are all going to sit. And I can see how her head comes down at an angle on this side. Now I'm using my eye and judgment at this point, and partly it's because I've been doing it for a while and I start to trust my eye, and part of it, I still have to occasionally just sit back and just re-engage with what I've drawn and see where the measurements are. Have I put this in the right place? Doing down a basic drawing might seem like a bit of a tedious thing to do. It might seem like it's taken a bit of time, and basically all the marks I'm putting on a page won't be there at the end of the drawing. So you might think, well, what's the point? Why not just get stuck into putting the heavy darks down? This is important because you can adjust things at this stage until you start to understand where your shapes are. So as I can see, there's a big sort of triangular shape that comes down this side, falling down from that mark here, and then kind of cuts across the top of her shoulder there. There's this big triangular shape. Got a couple of things hassling me. One is my mouse stick, and the other is my iPod holder, so I'll move those things. So yeah, at the back of her head, we've got this arc that comes over and around. It's quite deep, it comes out here. It's a very free way of drawing. That's one of the reasons why I'm holding my pencil at the back of the pencil rather than holding the point. It's very hard to get a free line when you've only got the movement of your wrist, which only gives you that arc of movement. Whereas you're using your whole arm and a larger pencil, you can move right around your image, and you're seeing the larger image on the page to try and really guess where the big shapes are. At no point in the minute am I worried about detail. And it might be an element of your drawing that you're working on at the minute, that you're fastidiously copying an eye, and you're looking at all of the eyelashes and the pupil and how things work together. But if you've got that eye in the wrong place because you haven't thought about where to position the eye and you've just gone straight into drawing it, you might have to move everything else around to fit it, which is actually more difficult. Drawing the big shapes at the minute is quite playful, and there's nothing definite because I'm drawing lightly. I know that anything that I do on a page I can adjust, so it takes the pressure of getting things wrong away. And I'll try and always re-emphasize the point. It's not a case of right and wrong, it's a case of placing something down and slowly adjusting. You notice a lot of people say that they use grids and it saves them much time. Did you ever do that until you trained your eye? No, I didn't use grids. Gridding is certainly a time saver in the respect if you use it well. I have seen people use grids and haven't really thought about them, and the grid that they've placed over their image is different to the grid that they place on their drawing surface, and they try to go, oh, the second grid in has a circle in it, and the second grid in on theirs, because of the spacing of it, is out and it doesn't have a circle in it, but they'll put a circle in because it says the second grid. So they start to trust the device rather than really think about what they are looking at. If you do use a grid and the same format, the image that you're looking at has a grid and your drawing has a grid on it, it's a way of breaking the drawing down into bite-sized chunks basically. But if you think about it, this is just one of those squares on a grid. It's no different. But we're not getting sucked into detail, we are just looking for placement. You could break this down into quarters, which might help you, or you can marry up where lines and shapes come out. But I have seen it where people use these mini tiny grids, and a good majority of them don't have anything in them, and they spend ages measuring out these lovely quality lines all going through their drawing, but they're not used, so there's a lot of information there which is kind of wasted. So be careful that you don't use a too small a square grid, because you're just doubling the workload up. Inside each grid you're basically doing the same thing as we're doing here on the larger page, where you're making marks that are the same as that particular grid. We're just using the entire image. Breaking it down seems a little bit easier, not so overwhelming, but if you get past that fear of this is just the same, you don't worry about it anymore. I'm looking at this and thinking, right, okay, I've got this arm angle coming out here, might be a little bit further up. Maybe in the scale of things, I can look between distances of where this point is away from this point. Maybe this point needs to come out here just a wee tad more. This point actually is almost in the center of the page, so I think it might come up a little bit, maybe just about there in respect to where that point is. So I'm looking at spaces between things, not just the lines and the shapes, but the point of placement. So this gap under where her chin meets her neck, and this space here between the back of the head and where the hair comes down for the shoulder. We can see the angle of it. I can put my pencil, align my pencil along that same angle, move it back to my drawing, and then I know, you can see the pencil line there on the shadow, that is the line of that angle. So you can see those from the initial thought where it was, which was there, it's now there. Now that's quite an arc, that's quite a difference. But just to help me start putting a mark down, to think I know what it is, to measuring to see where it actually is, and then putting a light mark down. Now as I build up the drawing, that mark's going to disappear into the whole volume of the drawing. There's a good question, Alex, like that. There's nothing wrong with using grids if you feel comfortable about using them, and you start using them on a regular basis. You will actually start to train your eye through using grids as well. The problem being is if you draw the grids too heavily, you don't want the grid to be there in the final artwork. So always draw them till they're infinitesimally not hardly even there. They're just a suggestion on the page. So if you are rubbing out afterwards, that they disappear, or if you're painting over them with a light wash, that they disappear into the painting. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been watching a few of the videos on Sky Portrait Artist of the Week that's produced on Sunday on Sky TV's Facebook page. So there's a program on Sky Arts called Portrait Artist of the Week, and they've been doing the lovely 4-hour sit down on the Sunday sessions. So they have an artist who's been on the show previously and a famous sitter. This week I think it's Fuella Benjamin. For those people in the UK, that is the lady from the old Play School days, which was a kids TV show back when I was a kid. And she looks amazing. She's 70 now, she's a baroness. So she's on this Sunday. So at 10 AM they basically start it, they have a conversation with an artist, and for 4 hours you can sit there and draw and paint with lots of other artists from around the world, and then you can upload your finished work to hashtag myPAOTW, which is my Portrait Artist of the Week. If you upload it on Instagram, you'll see thousands and thousands of images of what people are doing out there, and it's interesting to see from people who are obviously trained, who are very might be professionals, to hobbyists, to amateurs, to students starting out, to children doing it. But it's interesting to see the response, because you can capture your own image by doing a screenshot of a certain part of a portrait of personality coming through the gestures that they might make with their hands. Or so they also give you an image to work from. If you're not that tech savvy and you're not too sure how to do it, they will give you an image which you can download from, I think they post it up on their Facebook page and Twitter page, or on Sky Arts. But if you can, you can watch it and then click an image that you like. You don't have to do it in 4 hours if you don't want to. You've got the rest of the week to do it, and you can upload it as long as it thinks it by 2 PM on a Friday. They then select a winner. First, second and third, three artworks which they think stand out, and it's done by the judges from the show. Yeah, and it's good fun. It's a really relaxing way to spend the Sunday morning, even if you just listen to the conversation. Last week it was great because the conversation about art was quite interesting. So I had Samira Ahmed, who's a journalist, an award-winning journalist, a chap from the show, and just the thought processes the artist was going through are very, very similar to what most artists go through. And it's nice to have that connection where you kind of go, yeah, I feel like that, or I've made that same mistake, or that's the way I do it. But also you can see how he works through some of the painting issues and drawing. So yeah, it's an interesting program to watch, definitely. So I go on it every week and have a go. In fact, I've got my little video capture of it of what I did this week. So it'll be up for this will go on for about a minute. I'll go quiet, but don't panic, don't worry. Um, it's just the start to stop time lapse. I did this picture of Samir Ahmed in about 4 hours. I worked in charcoal and pan pastel, um, and you can see how I start off. And I try to get a little bit looser. That I'm going to be attempting today in this portrait in a very similar style. And you can hopefully see how you can pull and push things, move things around. I think at one point during the of the portraiture, I kind of put her eyes and I went, they were so dark. It looked like she had two black eyes, and it wasn't that at all. It was just a positioning, and I could lighten them back up and adjust and sort of sculpt the charcoal on the page. But yeah, well, anyway, here it is. It lasts about a minute, so there won't be any sound, but tell me what you think afterwards. Here it is. Okay, so that was it. It's quite quick. I kind of zoomed it all in to about a minute, and that's about 4 hours worth of work. So you can see sort of arms flailing everywhere. Alex said you don't know whether to be inspired or depressed at how good everybody is. Be inspired. Um, when I will have difficulties with doing something, and then when I'm watching other people's work being posted, I kind of go, oh, I can kind of see they had the same problem, but they worked through it by just moving the error out of the way. A lot of people put up time lapses, so it's great. It's a great way of both learning and also reflecting on the work that you've done. It was great. Did a 4 hour deadline on form. You use some materials, lots of area to cover. Certainly with working in charcoal, it's a little bit faster flowing. It's a lovely flowing material, but you're not having to work the page so much to get a really heavy dark. Working in the pencil, even though it might be a 9B, you've got to go over the surface quite a lot to build up that density, which is no bad thing. Spending that time to build it up slowly can really give you a rich, deep black. If you rush it, sometimes there's lots of grain that the paper can show through. It'll always look slightly greyish or bitty. Um, the benefit of using the pan pastel is it gives a really good thick black coverage. But that was towards the end when I knew where everything was. Certainly if I put a heavy black down on the page and went to try and rub it out because it was in the wrong place, I would have a greyness to the paper that I might not necessarily want. So it was about doing exactly what I'm doing here, figuring out where things are. Now I was just looking at the underneath the chin there. There's a wonderful black line which comes down that way, follows right through down to where her top is, and I can see how far away her top is. This does come down at a more horizontal position here. It's just behind me on, you can't quite see it. I'm just slightly out of the way. If I can move myself, hang on a second. If I move myself over up there, like floating around, it's just here on the bottom of the page. So I know that I have more. If I can zoom out a bit, wrong way. I have more page then, and that will work a little bit better. I've got more page there, which shows the blackness of her top. I can see how that comes back up at this point, and there's a kind of a rectangular base, almost like a trapeze shape, with a bit that comes down here. that way, and then her shoulder almost follows in line to about, I'd say there, comes down to a side angle and back off this way. Now the image that I've got on here, if I zoom in a little bit, is light. It's not that heavy dark line. You see that? There's a lot of wispy lines there that can disappear into the drawing. If I was very heavy handed and put on a very dark controlled contouring line, that line might be there all the way through the drawing. It might not be something I want. What I'm going to do now is block in some of those shapes. So rather than, I'm actually looking at the screen at the moment, so I'm actually going to go to the real image in the book and set that up in front of me, so it makes it a little bit easier to draw from. So this image of this is on page 30 if you get this book. So that's the book there, and that's the image I'm working from. As you can see, there's a, whenever you take a photocopy, it's a lovely black, rich blackness to the book itself. Maybe out the screen flare. But the I took a quick scan of it there, but the scan on the screen is quite green. But there's enough information on there to kind of get you going. But yeah, again, it's a lovely book. Try get hold of a copy if you can. So even if you're working in a different medium, maybe ask Santa for it for Christmas. If you've been a good boy or girl. I had to buy it myself. That tells you a lot, doesn't it? Maybe I've not been good enough. I'll move some things out of the way to make this a little bit easier for myself. So having sort of your workspace kind of set out, this is a bit ad hoc as I'm kind of talking to you and doing things at the same time. I've still got my coffee as well, which is now lukewarm. I'm now my Instant Human Just Had coffee mug. Definitely needed that this morning. So yeah. So apart from all that lot, how's your week been, by the way? I'd say it's not all about me and all about learning to draw. This is not. This is just about chat. Hopefully you've had a good week. It's been a bit of a hectic one if you've been in lockdown. It's been a strange one for me because we went back early. I work in a school as an art technician as well. So we had an extended Halloween break, which is good. I was just having the break, but then we were back into work and everything's kind of back to normal again. But it is different being in school because there's certain things we can and can't do. The restrictions are there, curtailing everything we do. It's a different thing to get through. So I can understand if you're working in the hotel business or the bar and restaurant businesses, it's incredibly frustrating, especially here in Northern Ireland, when decisions were a little bit delayed about what was going to happen next, whether we were staying in lockdown, not coming out of lockdown. So yeah, it can be really tough, and these things can play in your mind. But what I'd say to you is, if you've got a hobby or a distraction, even if it's spend an hour doing something that just takes you away from the stresses and strains of life, it can be incredibly good for your mental health. It can give you something else to focus on, something else to contemplate, which will give you time not to be in that kind of emotional turmoil of stress. You know, drawing and doing something fun, a fun activity. You know, even if it's walking. I'm not a great walker. My partner Andrew, she loves walking. You know, doing those things are very important to you. So, not to be overly swamped by things. Having a pastime or a hobby, or if this is your new passion in life and it's going to be something you're going to be doing professionally, you can really invest your time into it because we've got the time. Why not use it positively? You know, hopefully with the vaccine that all comes out soon, and we can see this might be the beginning of the end of COVID. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So let's get back to some of these marks. I just want a place where we've got a bit of a shape where the hairline is. Comes down this way. A wonderful shape that comes down the back here. The curve that comes down there. These wonderful lines. This reminds me sort of the image reminds me of kind of Art Deco. There's so many hard structural lines. There's an artist called Tamira Lempicka, who did these very angular featured portraits, and I saw some in the marks that he used. And there's a thing called bravura, where they use the expressive mark, but it's so well considered and placed they can cover a large area relatively quickly by suggesting the shape of a top, and you don't have to go into so much detail. Like she has a necklace on, which is this lovely kind of squarish pendant that she's got at the bottom here, but we can kind of see that if it's a very simplified shape, but you don't have to go into much detail to suggest that it is a necklace. You know, there's a kind of a dottiness to this line here, a suggested dottiness. There's a couple of marks up here, and it sits within this space, which looks like the cleavage part of the top that she has on. Now, we don't need to go into all the nooks and crannies of every little joint of link in between the chain and the jewellery, so I thought that was interesting, that there's a suggestibility to some of the mark making to suggest what the images are, but when you actually look at them, they're quite an abstraction of what it is. There's quite an abstracted shape of what this necklace is. I quite like that about the drawing. There's a play between some of the beautifully detailed and subtle elements of the face and how the light turns and the tone, and this is what makes the drawing for me visually interesting. It's not just all the same all the way through. So if it was all hyper realistic, you've got to decide what do you want the focus to be, because you can't physically focus on detail on the entirety of the portrait. You've got to kind of pick out your areas of interest, and that's something you decide as an artist. You know, there's got to be some sort of softer edges which are slightly out of focus, and some elements that are going to be quite sharp and clinical that you can zone into. Generally, when you're doing a portrait, it's going to be about the features of the face because you want something to be identifiable with, but concept wise you can play around with that. You know, you might have somebody's hand holding something. There may be a portrait about them, but their face just gets a bit out of focus and fuzzy. So the object is what's in the hand, but you know it's that person holding it, so you can read it as a certain personality or person. There's lots of things you can do. You can play around with it. I would say go and research portraiture, see what piece of portraiture which you really like, and really analyse it. Look to see what it is about that drawing which you really like. Classes are great and something you look forward to every week. Good. I do too, Desiree. This is my kind of fun bit of my week where I can just have a chat, talk about art, do a bit of drawing. I feel like I'm actually contributing something, but I'm also getting an awful lot back out of it. So I really do appreciate you, everybody being here. Talking about walking, I went for a walk with a friend of mine. We were at the park for the first time the other day. Good. Didn't know it was so big, and just lovely walks. We'll definitely do again. Yeah, just getting out of your little environment sometimes. You're wearing a mask, you're outside. It's nice to go. Obviously, we can't travel too far either, but often we live in an area that there's loads of really interesting stuff that all tourists go to. It's just that we've never gone to them. There's a place called the World Garden in Bangor, and we did a sculpture exhibition there, and people have said they'd lived there all their lives and never been to it. And it'd been opened quite a few years ago. They did a lot of work to reclaim what was basically a dump at one point, but it used to be these beautiful Victorian gardens for the main house, and the council took over the main building and redeveloped the interior of it and went back to how it was all formerly set out. And it's such a wonderful space just to go and sit in, and sometimes it's absolutely beautiful. The gardeners do an amazing job there, but because we put a sculpture exhibition on, people had a reason to go to see it because we had sculpture, because we were doing a lot of promotion about where it was. And then they walked in and went, wow, where has this been? You know, I've lived here all my life and I didn't know it was here. So there's lots of areas in our own locale that we kind of know of but we never go to, and now it's, I think, the perfect chance to do that. Do you mix your medias on drawing? Graphite, charcoal, and pastels? No, I don't mix charcoal and graphite. I don't mix pastels with graphite. There is a reason. It's basically how they sit together. Graphite's got a very fluid molecular structure. It's like little plates, and they sit very well with other bits of graphite. But when it comes to the molecular structure of charcoal, it's like a gravelly ball. It doesn't quite sit, and the charcoal kind of flips off the pencil or the graphite. And likewise, if you've got charcoal down, it doesn't quite adhere to the surface of the charcoal, so it kind of skip off. You can use charcoal with chalk. You can use it with pastel. You can use pastels with charcoal and chalk. They work really well together because they bind really well. They layer up nicely. But you'll find with graphite, it doesn't. It's a different type of medium. There's lots of processes which are similar that I do, like you can use charcoal dust and graphite powder, and separately on different pictures, and I can use them in the same way. The way I'm drawing this, I could do it with a graphite block to get large areas in, but I wouldn't get the density that I'm particularly looking at, because this is really a really dense black. I could work the surface until it became dense black in pencil, but it would take quite a while. And it's something I want to kind of get to the immediacy of how these marks have been put on. So when I looked at this, I went, this is relatively quick. Now you could use what I'm going to use. I'll use to begin with. This is just a bit of compressed charcoal. There's a company called Jacquard, which have, where we have the camera. It's a compressed charcoal. You get 2 sticks in a small box like that, or you can buy sort of a larger pack, which they don't cost that much, but it's just a condensed charcoal powder. It's very even all the way through, and you could use that in the same way that I'm going to draw this in. So I've got, so say, got some of the marks here already. I'm just going to follow those around. So I'm putting these marks down just with the edge. You see, it's quite graphic in the way I'm putting these down. I'm following the forms that I've already drawn in. I'm not drawing this out of my own head. I'm still reverting back to looking at the image. Constantly get used to looking at the image and you're drawing all of the time. And I can see where the shoulder is here. There's a bit of a height there. A line that comes down this way. A bit there. And the line there. That mark comes all the way down to about there, I think. I'm going to put a mark in there just to inform me where things are. A mark there, goes up that way, comes back that way, down that side. And there's a mark which goes down from there, there, oh, lower than that, there, to there. So this whole area I can block in. Now you can see, as you start to fill in this area, you can see the graininess of the charcoal and paper. It kind of bounces across the top of it and doesn't get into all the nooks and crannies. That's one of the reasons why I quite like the pan pastel, because when you put it on, it's got these little like spatula things, and you can get different tips. This one is a pointed one, and you can get square or rounded. This is the pan pastel itself. Looks like an eyeshadow, but it's just a pastel powder compressed into a little tray, which is easy to use. And I can use the flat edge of the pad and just map in that whole shape relatively quickly. Now that's quite you can see it's kind of see-through a little bit, but as you go over the surface of it, it becomes denser. I'll just do a little demonstration here. So I'll go over this whole area to the point where it gets quite dense and quite black. Now I've gone far enough over this direction not to impede on the drawing itself. That is just a little demonstration about how dark you can get this. Again, you could scrape over the surface with your very dense compressed charcoal and do the same thing. It does create a bit of dust, so do be careful if you're doing this on a kitchen table. Maybe lay some newsprint down, because you will get a very sort of fine grainy powder kind of drift off and drop down over your drawing onto your table. But you can pick this up as well. You can almost use it like a well, and you can map in other things. So you can start to map in where that is the angle of their head. Do it lightly. You can start to map in the edge of her face that way. It's a very free-flowing way of drawing. There's a wonderful edge to that part of the chin, on the inside of the chin, and how that kind of comes up the side of the face, and it breaks into the shape then. You can see where things are placed. You might want to start to place in where certain shapes are. So if you went from the chin, you could look up and see where the angle of that nose is. So that comes to about there. All of this I can rub back. If you went with a paper towel and just went over the surface, if it's done lightly at this stage, not this stage. If it's just wrong place, you can rub it back lightly with a soft tissue, and it'll take it back, and you can use your rubber to refine it and sculpt it, so you can push lines around a little bit. Do you make sure medium? Oh, yeah, so I answered that one. Exla. Hello. Exla. I love the one. Oh, the name's lovely. I love the internet for sort of introducing kind of new names and new places and faces. So thanks for being here. So yeah, if you've got any art questions, do feel free to ask. Don't be feeling that you're not too sure what this is about. This is just an art chat. So there might be certain elements that you like about drawing or don't like about drawing that you want to discuss. You can do, as long as it's always friendly. Otherwise, I have had to beat a couple of people just because it became frustrating. It's a bit of a shame, but as long as everybody is good. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be what I think. You can disagree with my processes as long as you keep it polite and friendly. That's that. So you can see I'm just sculpting over the shape of this eye socket, and how that eye socket actually works comes down that way, and this whole thing is in the form of a shadow, which then links into where the form of the shadow, it's a little bit harsh, form of the shadow of this side of her eye is coming down this way, and then that comes down to where the bridge of her nose is coming down this side, which travels down, comes around to where the tip of her nose is. I can judge that. Maybe that's a bit too low down. Maybe it's there. So I know that all this is in shadow. That shadow comes out to about that point where I made that little mark, which then gives me the highlight of the cheek on the other side. But also I'm following the angle of her eyebrow ridge across this way, comes down this way, which is all in the shadows, but there's a real darkness bit here to where the eye orbit is. I'm not doing details, I'm just placing shapes at the moment. So how that comes down about there, and this falls down about that part of the shadow which comes out about there. Her mouth goes off in this kind of angle, shadow shape. This is very loose and rough at the minute. I might move a couple of things around. The underneath of her chin, the underneath of her lips, sorry, should I say, comes up that way. I might move this chin down a little, just a wee tad. Maybe have it a bit high. Maybe the chin comes down to about there, and then it comes down that way. So very quickly I've got a face structure starting to appear. I know this eye comes out a bit further. This is all in shadow. So I'll just lightly use this pad just to draw the graphite, sorry, charcoal I've got down already. Draw that over the image. There is a straightness of a hair which we can get in here, and that hair comes across here a little bit. I'll put that little mark in. Okay, puts up there. This one leads up to here, so this hair needs to come down to about that point as that goes over that way. So if you find an area that you've not made a mistake, that you need to adjust, I think adjustment's a much kinder, nicer word than getting things wrong and right. We'll always get things wrong on a portrait. We'll always put a mark down which isn't quite in the right place, but you might need to kind of fill in some of the other forms and shapes first, just to readjust, redefine where certain things are. So I say it's not where things are wrongly placed, they're just not in the right place at the moment. But if your drawing stays flexible through the process, you can adjust them. There is a wonderment to artists who walk up and place the right mark, what looks like in the right place straight away. Obviously that comes with practice, but it comes from being well observed as well, really taking time to consider and measuring before you make the mark where certain things are going to be placed. You can spend that time really training your eye, which really helps, and it's a good kind of process to do, because it's something you will always use, of adjusting where certain things are in your drawing. So I'm just using that mark just to help me guide. Similarly, where that top mark is on her, let's see it on the drawing there. So this mark here is maybe a little bit dense, but it's the top part of that hairline, and it just helps me frame where certain things are in her face. So maybe I know this hair, this mark comes in a little bit more, which brings me down to the lovely part of the outside of her cheek, where this part of the eye comes in. The shadow then comes across over it to give, you see this little triangle shape. If I can draw a straight edge, I can draw a triangle. They might say, I can't even draw a straight edge. Use a ruler. You know, or use a stick. What do I have in my drawing pad? You know, the little coffee stirrers you get in coffee shops, little wooden sticks. You can use one of those as long as it's straight edge, or a bit of paper. And you could literally just make a little mark along a bit of paper or a straight edge. I'm not using the ruler to measure 3.27 millimeters or anything like that, just using the straight edge. But you could use literally a piece of paper or a mask. This is the plastic packet that by Soft. Yeah. This is what this came in, but I could use that in the same process. You know, there's a straight edge, and I can just use it as a mask to create a straight edge as well. So if I can create a straight edge, I can create a triangle. So if I can see a triangle, I can replicate that triangle. It's much easier to draw a triangle than it is to draw the subtle elements of a highlight that's on the outside cheek of a head that's turned in 3/4 profile. If you explain it like that, that sounds quite difficult. When you say, can you draw that triangle, it's a lot easier. Draw mode, I like your hair. My hair personally, or the drawing hair on here? Probably the one on here. Mine's all tied up the minute. You can see. We'll lean in. There we are. It's all tied up in bunches at the back. Particularly long hair for different things that I do on the outside of Art World. Do extras work, and I've had long hair for quite a while. It does need a cut, but the hairdressers have been shut. So that's my excuse. A few weeks ago I had a massive beard, and I was having to wait until I got the okay to shave off, and so I've gone back to my normal stubble. But if you're talking about the drawing, I like the hair on here as well. It's very expressive, it's loose. You can see some very lovely marks that come out of it. There's a wonderful mark that comes out from her chin, which is about there. Kind of a mark comes down here. And I said before, this is very, there's a lovely triangle just down there actually, look. As it comes up, it's a little bit further in from this one, but it comes up there, comes down that way. There, look, you see that triangle? And that little triangle gives you like a diamond effect or kite mark effect as to where this one is. And this one comes up here, it comes down there, goes straight across this way. There's a slight arc to it. It comes back up this way, back in that way, back down that way. So where I've had these marks placed, I can kind of fill them in a little bit. Your hair, it's nice. Thank you very much. It's going grey, but I think I earned my grey hair, so I'm going to wear them with pride. So it's a black dress. I'm just going to block this in. So I quite like the looseness of this approach. Yeah, there's a certain amount of confidence to it, you know, being brave and just put mark down. But do you know what? It's only paper at the end of the day. If you don't like the drawing, but you get used to making the marks, these more definite, defined marks, because you've been assured where to put them, because you kind of did a little bit of measuring out to begin with to put for placement. That you start to realise where your marks are in good placement. This is all loose and light. There's a lovely mark which comes around there to give the edge of that hair, and the rest of this is in blackness. So what I'm going to do is quickly block all this in. I'm going to loosely block it in, not go really black. Loosely block it in just so I can get a contrast between the lights and the darks in the overall picture. So what are you guys working on at the minute yourself? Are you doing portraits? Are you drawing these things that are around you, things that have interested you? Are you working on a portrait for anything specific? And I'll be doing my portrait submission for Sky Portrait Artist of the Year soon. I've been working out the composition and the idea behind it and how I'm going to execute it. I don't think I'll be showing that one online. The reason being is I think I quite like to see how far it gets in the process. If it doesn't get through, that's okay, it's part of the process. I'll share with you obviously the image. I'm going to talk through what I've done. But it's always interesting to see, there's the program that's produced on Sky Arts on a Wednesday. There's a wonderful artist this week, Kofi his name was, and almost for me, for immediate marks that he started to make right at the very beginning, just how free, loose but expressive he built up the character of the person who sat there quite well. He added to it by some of the mark making, but some of his observations were quite key, and how he zoned in on how the guy kind of looked. There's more behind the eyes than just the image of his eyes, if you like, and that came through his portraits really well. And it's a subtle art, that process, and I quite enjoyed watching his process on during the program. It's what I linked into, as I said before at the very beginning of this, how I used to draw with my sculptural background, and I think there's a balance that maybe I could bring to my drawings. They're not necessarily like Kofi's. I don't copy his style, but there's elements to my drawing that I think have a wonderful subtlety to them. Now that's not being cocky, it's just I notice qualities in the work that I really like. So there's subtlety to some of the mark making processes which read a lot, and also some of the well observed detail of things which can blend really well as a balance. If it's all loose and wild, it can be impressive, but it can be overwhelming. And also, if it's all detail, it can be impressive, but it can take you off at a different tangent as to how you want the portrait to come across. So I've been thinking about those things. So I'm going to try doing a portrait of myself again to get back on the show, to hopefully redeem myself, because when I was on it, it wasn't my best drawing day, let's say that. Be kind to myself. So to say, I don't beat myself up. I kind of was honest that it wasn't a great day for me drawing, but I learnt a lot from that process. I learnt a lot from all of my mistakes I made during the day, and it's something that's helped me kind of inform what I'm doing right now for you by learning. Because I think it was one of the first times I did it. I came back home, and there was the lovely Anjali Hindra, who's an actress, who was a sitter, and I got one image of her on my camera that I didn't use during the day, and I thought, right, I will redraw it, and I revisited the portrait that I was creating, and really helpful cathartic process. Awesome, hello, good to see you. Really good cathartic process. That if you make a mistake about something, don't run away from it. Sit back and go, okay, what was wrong with it? How can I improve on that? What was so out about the drawing? How can I redefine what it was where I went wrong? What can I do to analyze, to identify what areas didn't work and how you can improve on them? I want to start to put the back of this head in. I just think it'll help me figure out where details and features are. So I'm not getting sucked into details and features at the moment. Could you achieve a similar effect with a sort of monochrome watercolouring? Yes, you could, absolutely. If you mapped out, as we did, with a very, very light pencil, and you basically used one tone, and the density of the wash, if you've got a lot of pigment in the water, you can get very dense, darker colours. But also, if you wash it out, you'll get these little wonderful block light wash areas, which will give you a certain tone, and you can build upon those in layers as well. So you can certainly do this in a watercolouring style. Be quite fun to try it. Obviously, you'd have to change the quality of your paper. I mean, I suppose you could use heavyweight cartridge paper, but definitely need to stretch it first, because it will buckle otherwise. As soon as you wet this paper, it kind of wrinkles up by itself. So if you soak the entire paper first, lay it on a wooden board, and then put gummed paper tape along the edges and pin the corners of the paper, lay it flat in a dust-free, cat-free environment, so the cats don't walk across the surface of it, but let it dry naturally. It'll start to buckle a little bit, and as it dries out, it pulls and stretches, because the paper is already stretched because it's wet. So when you lay it down, it's wet and it's quite stretched out, and as it dries, it pulls itself back in. But the gummed paper dries out at the same rate, and because it has adhered to the board and the paper surface as well, it kind of pulls it a little bit, and it gets quite taut, which means whenever you apply water over the top of it again, it doesn't buckle. So you can try that out as well. So let me pull this down. I'm going to get it too detailed up around this part. This is all quite dark around here. This is dark here, but all this is definitely dark. So this was quite dense, so it'll probably take a couple of passes with a pan pastel. Bit of shadow there, and it breaks into the darkness down here, but all of that's black. Now, as I say, you could fill this in with your, this is all dark as well. You fill this in with pan pastel by going over it layer by layer. You could use the edge of your compressed charcoal, just like this, and build it up that way. You do have to really sort of push it onto the surface. That's why using a heavyweight paper really works, because there's a bit of grain to it still. You can see it by all this mottled effect on the paper surface, where the charcoal is basically layering, so taking a slither off of the charcoal each time you do a pass, and it sits on the surface of the paper, but it doesn't quite get into all nooks and crannies. Could you? Sorry, yeah, I answered that one. Love the ghost emoji draw mode. Good timing for Halloween. I'm using the pad itself. This is the charcoal, obviously the compressed charcoal that I put on here. I'm using the pad from the pan pastel just to push that charcoal into the surface, so that whole area becomes much darker and deeper. You see that? There is, what I'll say to you as well, there is a slight difference from what you're seeing to what's on the screen because of the angle. If you notice the angle of that's basically straight in front of the lens looking at it, and you can see it's coming at an angle, so it's skewing the image slightly. So some of the angles might not look exactly like they do on here, but you'll certainly see on mine they are following the angle of the image. So if I take that across to my image, it's pretty much the same. So if I take the image off the screen and take it to the image on the page, it's actually the same. I've got that lined up right in front of me and it's following the line, because you're looking at an angle, you can see more of the dark behind it, if that makes sense. So we're looking at two different directions. He beat me in subs. I have 31 and he has 36. Listen, Draw Mode, I'm sure we can share subs. So guys, go and check out Draw Mode, see what his page is like. Subs of subscriptions, by the way, if we weren't too clear about what that was. There we go. I fill this in. This is all black here. It's got a few little light spots and etc. But there's an element of where the hair comes down here. I want to be kind of careful not to go too over this surface with my dark marks too much, so I might be a little bit of lighter application. Go dark down this point. In the book, it's not as dark as it is on the screen. You can see a bit of the shape here. What's nice is it gives an idea of a shoulder coming down to the chest and across the top of the chest, but the hair sits over the top of it. This is all light. This is a light application of charcoal. So we get this tonal effect of dark, a light tone, a very light tone, a mid-tone dark tone, the same tone that's around the face here. So it softens everything a little bit, so it's not quite so harsh as this black and white like a zebra crossing. It does start out like that, but then we can start to pull in some of the shapes. And we could use sort of cloth to do that, or a pad just to tone this area in. And there's a shadow that comes up against here, all the way through the hair. You know, there's nothing really on the face that's white as the page, so I might tone that whole area. there's a couple of areas that catch the highlights, you know, that look a little bit like the biggest highlight. But even by using my finger just to blend, I'm using my finger behind a cotton pad on this instance, but you could use a tissue as well, to soften some of these marks. You know, I've not really put the charcoal on this area yet, so this might be a bit hard where I'm finding it hard to move it around. I can see how that area moves a little bit this way and that. Now, let's see what I was using this out for rubber before. But I had that dark line. It's a bit too dark and it's a bit distracting, so I'm going to pull it back a bit. Just take it out, because I'm going to cover this area in dust anyway. And then, so this whole area I'm going to knock back a bit. So this is a similar process to how I drew Samira, and then I kept refining it and changing and moving things around a little bit. I took my time to see where certain marks were. Go there. I'm going to go back this way. Now, you might look at that and think, alright, our face is way out, there's loads of stuff that's wrong with that. That's okay, it's part of the process. We're still building up layers at this point. This is awesome. Doopy doo, thank you. It's very kind of you. So, again, it's not about detail. If I need to, I can go in and just maybe think about some of the certain structural areas, like the shape of the eye, and lightly redefine some of those things about how they move across the face that I've got. You know, how this line might be further down this way. How is it that far out? You know, does it need to move back in this way? I think it's okay where it is. I think this line's okay where it is as well. Certainly maybe take the edge off that chin so it's not quite so sharp, because it's much softer around a face. This line actually continues all the way out and across the face to create a lovely cheek, almost cherub-like cheek that she has in the picture. I can see where the definition of the other side of her lip is, on this side, this upper lip. Now that cuts back in this way. So I'm not moving the position of the mouth, but certainly the position of some of the shadows that I've got here, because on the where it comes back out this way is where the tip of a nostril is on the other side of a nose, and how that comes up and meets that line to this point here. There's a little light shadow which comes across the top of there, which meets it. This eye can maybe come down a wee tad. Yeah, move that there. Come in a little bit, down a little bit. This gives you the bridge of the nose. The nose is on this side. I can maybe bring this shadow across a little bit, so where this breaks to go along the ridge of the top of the nose is has a very soft edge. I'll pay close attention to that, but it does have a shape to it. Now it moves around the face. It goes down this way. It's a wonderful part where it's almost like a diamond shape. You can see that. I put that in. because the line of a nostril is cutting through it on this side. It's a very abstract way to draw. We're drawing angles and shapes and lines and blocking things in, but we're getting some of the references of what a face looks like. We're getting a nose and eye, two eyes. All this is in shadow. So I can literally lightly use my pencil to refine that shadow shape and make it more even. Now, I know before you say there is a highlight in there and an eye that's in there, and the eye shape comes down this way and cuts across this way, because it's actually a triangle shape. And it's got an eyelash which kind of comes out from there. You see that triangle shape? If I zoom in, maybe you can see it a little bit better. Really Star Trek fans out there, if I can just... Right, let's zoom into that eye. Any Star Trek fans out there? Where am I? Well, there is. That looks like the emblem of a Star Trek insignia that they would wear. You see that? It comes off this way, comes down that way, and it's got a little V that comes in. Now, that's going to be a little mark to suggest where the eyelash is. It's not part of the eye. The eye is actually set further back, so I know that it comes down this way a little bit. It's helped me figure out where the highlight is going to go, to create the illusion of where her eye comes in and over. It's let me know that maybe this comes in just a wee tad more than I've got it. This bridge of the nose is in a little bit more, so I'm just moving the line that was there to there. But you can see how I can get the overall shape, and it helps me then move this down a little bit, because it was too high up. Moving from there down to here, moving that across, moving that down there, moving that there. There's a shadow line that's underneath here, and it just dips down that way a little bit. All this is in shadow. So I'm just using my very light charcoal pencil just to scribble in this shadow shape. So you can see how that shadow now moves across. Zoom out, which is the other way, that way. You start to see the form and how that form is building up. I'm looking at the form of the face rather than the detail of the face. I can start to see that if this here is the shadow of the other side of the nose, which comes down this way, and as it comes down it gets denser and sharper. I don't want to go black because I'm going to go black on her face. But you can start to see that it starts to give it a three-dimensionality to it, and that's the sculptural element that I was talking about from the beginning. You start to see things in three-dimensional forms and planes, and how light moves across the shape of a face, or it could be a teacup, or it could be anything. It could be a football, it could be a mountain. Whatever it is, light falls around things. It falls down from the light source and cascades across the image, and as it goes down the image it will get darker and darker and darker, unless there is another light source. You know, if she's lit up from several places, you've got to think about that. She doesn't appear to be. There's a little bit of a shadow that comes into this square that comes down. As it gets to this point here, it comes straight across. I want to get to grips with this shadow that comes across here, because I've got it also open-ended that it just ends up coming straight, and it doesn't. It comes up to meet this side of the face. gives an ending to where the mouth is. From this point where the nose is in the shadow, there's a line which comes down this way, which creates this lovely shadow effect underneath the nose. There's a little bit of shadow just here beside it, which gives this cheek. So I know that this is a highlight on the other side of the cheek, but I've made little marks on it. You know, if it becomes an issue, you can take them out. Take them out now. The shadow of that other eye comes right in down here, and there's almost like a part of where this skull is, where you imagine if the skull came down here and around here, this would be the eye orbit. So this is like the side of the head, and that comes around. There is a slight hint of a shadow comes across here, so it comes down. So where we think the forehead was massive, it starts not to be, because this was the shape of the hairline. Remember at the very beginning, it's not the shape of her forehead, this is the shape of her hairline. Her hairline actually comes down here and down this way, and then down this way a little bit. So we can use these shadow shapes to really help us inform the shape of the whole head. It comes out up here. So all of this is a shadow. All of this is in shadow. I'm lightly scribbling in the shadow shape. As this whole head comes across this way, it gets lighter to the center. But this is definitely darker. Scribble this in. When I say scribble, I'm still trying to give a uniform flatness to the shading. I'm not scribbling all over the place. If you notice, I'm following the form of the head with the direction of my graphite, or my charcoal, sorry. I'm trying to keep it even and flat as possible. As we come up here, because we're travelling over in this direction, I'm trying to keep the pencil strokes even and together. Comes down here. This catches a bit of a highlight to the edge of the head here. The hair itself comes up this direction. There's a bit of a shadow there. Coming across the top here, the shape here, which is almost like a centre parting, which marries up to this mark. So it's encouraging to know that where I put this mark in relatively early on is meeting up now with some of the marks I'm starting to block in for the shadow shapes, which is good. Draw mode looks pretty good so far, thank you very much. I say it's early days, we've been chatting a lot. You know, there's been more of me chatting than it has been of me drawing, which is not always the same every week. But what you find is your drawing will develop relatively quickly, but it's not necessarily about speed. Giving yourself a timeline to work within can sometimes cut out a lot of the procrastination in the drawing. The and ahhing, whether you should or shouldn't put a mark down. If you've got a timeline, you kind of just go, I just need to put the mark down and move it if I need to. If you've got that flexibility where you can move your marks around a little bit, it makes it a little bit easier on you. If I start to block this whole shape in, it really helps to see where the structure of this face is. So what felt like it was getting really wide is starting to come back in a little bit. As I said, this is a slightly skewed image for you guys because you're not looking directly at it straight on. There's a slight kind of warp into the face. So where if I hold a square flat piece of paper up to me and move it across into the angle, it'll slightly look like it's doing that, where it's going off in a different direction. It's kind of tapering off into the distance, but it makes this side look really wide and this side narrow. So similar things happen to this drawing. This side of the drawing is looking more fuller than it is on my page in front of me, you know what I mean. I'll tweak it a little bit and bring it in just a wee tad, not much. I think just need to bring that up a little bit. There's like an egg shape in here of a highlight which comes across. Comes down a bit. This is all in the same shadow shape. So it's quite a sculptural way of drawing. You might want to try this. So don't worry about the image. If you're trying something out for the first time, it doesn't quite work for you, don't be afraid to try it again a few times. And it's just about refining the shapes that you got and the shadow shapes, and eventually you'll get to the likeness you get. Now some of these marks have been put down with kind of bravura. Remember that kind of ease of making the mark. It's just there. It's easier to do when it's your image you're creating, and harder to replicate as you are, you know, rediscovering somebody else's drawing or drawing in the artwork in the style of. We did the Sargent the other week, and obviously I'm not Sargent. I'm not pretending to be as good an artist, but what I'm looking at is how he will make marks when he puts marks down, the structure of them, where they are, where they go. You know, if we look at that mark that comes up, and this mark now which sits underneath her jaw there, that's darker. There's a squarish mark just there, and there's little marks for the image of that, where that necklace kind of comes down. Marks go across this way, mark a bit more there. This black angled element to this necklace she's got. So just going to use a brush to soften all of this now. So I'm really using the charcoal that's on the surface, pulling it into all these little white areas. It's also going over these lightly toned areas and just softening them in. It might cover up a highlight that I need to re-engage with and put back on again. That's okay, I can do that. This whole area is a tone darker than I've got it, because it's the bit that comes across the shoulder. This is much denser, that's in here. This is softer, this is all toned, it's not white, which helps me then figure out, okay, this face needs to be a little bit darker. Comes out this way. I've not quite resolved the other side of this mouth yet. There's nothing in that hair which is white, so let's get rid of it. Excuse me. It might look like I'm muddying this up a lot, but I don't want you to panic. I'm still following the highlights and little marks I've put to figure out where certain structures are in the face, because I can redefine them by carving back into it with the eraser. You can use these plastic erasers. You can get cheap Staedtler copies, or this is a WB plastic one. I'm not sure where I picked that up from. You can use mono erasers. There is like a chiseled edge one, or a mono eraser which has like a finer point to it, like that one. So it's a chiseled one which is slightly squarer and flatter, the finer one, and a big block one like that. So I do use a big black block one for larger shaped areas, so places like underneath the chin here. And think about how that sculpts down that way. And I might just use that one just to redefine where the highlight is on the edge of that cheek. You could use a kneadable eraser as well, just to dab it, just to pick up little elements of highlights as well. Basically it's like a putty rubber, a piece of putty, or a bit of blue tack. I wouldn't use blue tack, I do always use a kneadable eraser, but I'm just saying what the consistency is like. So you can shape it into different things by squidging it between your fingers. I use one by Winsor & Newton and one by Daler Rowney, because I think the oil content is just the right balance. So you can shape it. You can get firm and soft versions. The firm versions you really need them to work them. The soft version might be a bit too floppy and too much oil in it to kind of really work for you. So whichever best suits you, but you literally can dab it in certain areas. I'm kind of pulling that across the top of her nose. There's a little bit of a highlight just at the top there. This needs to be softer, this shadow here. There's a little bit of a highlight which comes off there, which is the top of her lip, and there's a little bit just before it goes into the shadow, which is the other side, the dip of the top lip, which is called the philtrum. There's a bit here on that top lip, which then carries out on the other side of the mouth. There, a little bit of highlight there. As this comes down underneath her chin, there's more of a highlight here, going down this way and coming back up this way to create the edge of where her jawline is on the other side of her face. There's a lovely highlight here which is on the slope side, the other side of her nose, which then curves back in up to this point on the bridge of her nose to get the illusion of a curve going around and over the cheek and then down this side, which comes down that way. The highlight of this top lid that comes down this way. So slight highlight a bit just at the top of it here, and then we can get the orientation of this triangle shape. Might bring it in just a wee tad, and then the forehead over this way, over that line. There is a bit of a highlight just in between that hair, which can sit over the top of the shadow of the forehead. Go down that way onto the brow ridge, come back over this way. So again, as I say, it's a very sculptural way of drawing. You kind of adding elements on and taking elements off, and re-engage and put them back on again. I'll give a bit of a nod to that nostril on the other side, because otherwise it made this look like the tip of a nose, and it's not. It's the soft bit. I'm going to dab that back a little bit because I think it's just a little bit too heavy-handed. So I'm rolling the putty rubber on it, just lifting it off bit by bit, just to soften it. And I can re-engage and put some of the tone back onto it again, but I'm softening the edge because I don't want it to appear so harsh. I can see that even in the darkness there's a slight sculpting of the shadows that come across and down the side of a nose, this side, just slightly lighter, just slightly lighter here, and this is definitely lighter, so I'm going to be crisper at this point. But it soon blends away into the shadows. Doesn't got such a sharp edge to it. There's a slight softness there, a sharpness on that side, a sharpness here. Again, I think it's got a sharpness more because of the drawing style than it has to do with her face. You can sort of see how the light sort of sculpts across certain forms. So go back in and shade some of these things back in again. It's like a dark triangle in this bit, which is where her other eye is. But even if I get really up close and look deep into the sketchbook, sorry, the book that it's drawn in, I can't see detail. I can only see the slight darkness, so I can't start drawing eyelids and eyeballs in it. You know, I have to draw the shadow shape that I can see. This is darker, but there's a softness to it. So again, I'm just evenly going over this whole thing and building it up. And it's layering. It's gone back over and over and over again. The shadow shape comes right around to this point on this side. Excuse me. Excuse me. Tickly cough. Need more coffee, that's what it is. I think definitely where it's darker should really help an awful lot. It's just on the other side of where this nostril is. But there. I'm just trying to figure out where the edge of this nose is as it comes down. So I'm really lightly going over this whole area. This nose comes down this way. It's just a subtle little shadow. Let's start to build this shadow up a little bit more. This comes up, the shadow is further over. I'll blend that in a little bit. I tend to blend this in, it seems to get more solid because it takes away the whiteness of the little grains in between each pencil stroke. So I start to see where the shapes are. I think this might come down a bit more this way. So I think this might be a bit too high, and I think this might need to come down just a wee tad more. So that comes down from there, and that's in a good position. I think this comes that way a little bit more, which just brings the width of this whole shadow a little bit wider, which helps then. It's not much, but it's enough to kind of redefine the contour of that nose. There's a little tiny shadow just about there, ever so subtle, which gives you the idea that this runs down to join this side of the shadow here, which gives you the more fullness shape of that nose and allows this shadow to kind of come across there a little bit. It comes up this way a little bit, but it comes also further down this way, so this shape is much wider. At this point, if you start to read this as this is the underneath of a nose, this is a bridge of a nose, this is one side of a nose, that's the other side of the nose. How these shadows start to work with each other. Maybe just bring that in just a tad. You start to build it that way. Does that make sense? Angela! I don't know how long you've been there because I was in my head drawing. Hello Lee, sorry for late. Do again. Your drawing is looking really good. Thank you very much, Angela. This is all kind of just experiment and playing with the mediums. And I found this lovely book. If you didn't see it already. It's called How to Draw Charcoal Portraits. But I thought some of the exercises in it were lovely to look at. An interesting way of drawing. Had elements that reminded me of a much more sculptural way that I used to draw, and something that I quite liked. So I thought it'd be great to kind of share that with you today. You know, is there something you would like me to cover over the next couple of weeks? Is there something more that's frustrating you in the drawing style that you'd like to discover or understand a little bit better, let me know what it is. There might be something you want to discuss that you've seen online recently and that you want to figure out how you can do it. Might be inspired by another artist who's had a go at doing sky portrait. Sometimes it's best to contact them direct and say, look, I was really impressed by your work, or maybe do a bit of research on them and see how they do it. I look at their website. They may even have a workshop themselves, always worth checking out. So just redefining some of the shapes and the shadows there. You can start to see it starting to come alive. I think this is way too light and white, so what I'm going to do is just take my cotton pad and just go over the surface of it, just to pull it back a little bit, to soften it down. But as I soften it down, I also then need to darken up that shadow a little bit. You can see the shadow of that cheek coming down here, across and down. It's starting to work quite well, but this side needs to be maybe a little bit lighter. There's no dark bit here. It's the same uniform lightness, but it's a little bit darker here and needs to be a little bit lighter there. So what I might do is just drag my rubber over the whole lot that way. Pay close attention to those really, really dark bits. Take my charcoal pencil. Just try to get this to be more uniform and flat, because it's starting to build in a texture that I don't really see in the drawing by the uniformity to it. So it's going to take my time and block in this whole area, certainly on this bit. Now it will appear dark at the moment because it's literally just on the surface, but when I brush over this, it will kind of flatten out a little bit. What I'm constantly ferreting around for right now is, I've got some other charcoal called Natron, and it's very traditional drawing medium, but they do a harder soft and sort of extra soft HB and Bs, etc. This is a B one I've got. Comes in sort of these square blocks. It's more refined than willow that you get normally. It looks like literally willow sticks. It's got a similar quality to the charcoal to it. It's very, very kind of forgiving, but you can really work this charcoal because it's evenly fired to get a nice refined edge and a fine point. I want to draw with the edge of it a little bit more in its flatter sense to get coverage over larger areas. So rather than just doing it with a point like that, I think doing it with an edge will give me a nice finish. So I'm just doing that on it's called Nitron paddle, but you can use a piece of sandpaper as well. So yeah, I've got a nice kind of finer point there, a finer edge on that, and drawing that whole surface is going to be much more even. because as it comes down here it definitely gets darker. So a bit darker here, then starts to get lighter up this side. So just how I use the compressed charcoal before to block in these large areas, I'm still using the edge of it rather than the point. I'm using the entire edge of the charcoal. I can flip across to the point to emphasize edges. We can see where the hair is sort of further out from the face. This comes down this way. There's areas of blockings that come in and out. I can use my rubber to sculpt back into that side of the hair. But I just want to make this whole area even. And I can work in that shadow because there's some wonderful subtleties in it. And as it comes down this point, it comes out that way. This is wonderfully soft. It's not as harsh as that. A little bit of shadow which comes out of the corner of the mouth in this direction. The shadow is a little bit wider. Kind of fades out that way, but it's darker and more intense on this side. As it comes across the face here and then over the chin this way, it's darker and more defined. As this dark shadow comes around, it disappears into this top lip. This top lip's not dark enough yet. There we go. These two lines kind of meet. This mouth is back here as the corner of the mouth. As it gets to this side, it gets lighter. Down to that top lip. It's looking really light there. As I said before, this bit here is much darker and sharper. But it just helps you tell where the edge of her mouth is. Do you see what I mean? Playing with that shadow still on that side of the cheek, but it's turned into a really nice shadow. We can get a really sense of this cheek is full and it's round, and it's gone round to the back, and there's light that bends over the top of it, and it's been cast by a piece of hair. This shadow here, it's been cast by a piece of hair that's sticking out, and it's that shadow falls down over through the eye, but across the top of the cheek and goes over the cheek and then down the other side, which meets this lovely kind of rounded shadow on the other side of the cheek here to create like this egg shape. So A good exercise is if you can get a ping pong ball or an egg, set it up with a harsh light, put it on a greyish or a white background. So you can really see how light falls across the shape and goes over it, and very seldom is a highlight on the edge of the object. It's normally further inwards into the centre, so just purely observation you think, oh well, light comes in, it must strike the edge. It often doesn't, because the object is three-dimensional. That a ball shape in a space doesn't hit only on the edge, it actually hits the bit that's closest to it, which is actually there, because the egg is curved, or the face is curved. This bit here is closest to the light. This bit here is further away because it's a three-dimensional shape, so it's not the edge that often catches the light, it's the centre of the object, or certainly a part of the object which has more mass. Does that make sense? Lee wondered why you wear headphones given we cannot contact you by audio. Does listening to music, for example, help when you draw? Yes, I do often listen to music, but I've actually got my own voice coming back through the headphones into here, just so I can make sure that you're actually hearing sound. Because these are all plugged into the headset. If I unplug the headset, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So it's a way of monitoring the sound. If I play it back, because there's a time delay, you would hear my voice repeated a couple of seconds later. So I've got that in my earphones. Sometimes why I pull the earphones back a little bit so I don't hear myself. But yeah, certainly when I'm working, I put on music. I don't necessarily have to put headphones on. I can just play the music. I put on films I don't watch, just listen to the soundtracks. I put on podcasts, listen to other artists talking. And that can be quite helpful as well, because when they're talking about specific issues they have or problems that people have during their drawing, I'm normally having one of those at a particular time, and them kind of talking through it reminds me of a process that I should be doing. And I go, okay, I need to take my time, not rush. All the things that I'm telling you guys, I do. I'm not trying to be anything different. I'm not saying, oh, I've got all this sorted out and I know what I'm doing. I'm still kind of fathoming things out and playing around with things. And I think good artists are constantly pushing what they do and why they do it and how they do it. Looking for different techniques, looking for different sources and forms of expression, developing their mark making techniques. So when they make a mistake, they own it, and they change it from a mistake to a possibility of development, or they'll go, okay, this didn't work for this particular piece right now, but I like the mark it made and I might use that later on. So it's a changing of your thought processes of right and wrong. If I put a mark down and it's not the right place, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. It's just helping me figure out where that mark should be later on. So this is starting to become a bit more uniform, a little bit more even, a little bit more. It's starting to take on the impression of hair, which is really interesting because I haven't drawn strands. This shadow will be a little bit darker. Often when you're drawing hair anyway, if you draw the shape of the overall form of the hair and then break that hair form down into shadow shapes, and then break that shadow shape down into darker areas of shadow shapes and things like that, you start to get a very hair-like structure starting to develop quite naturally. The flurrying little wispy tiny hairs that come off, these one or two hairs, You might be able to stick one or two of them in, you know, as a finish. There's a wonderful one that's on the drawing which goes just up here. That's done, you know, kind of at the end, just to curtail where things are. You might just add a little tiny filament of interest through a little tiny highlights. You might use your mono eraser and just, you know, pretend the hair came up here and there over this bit, and then it went like that. So when you zoom in, pan up, wait for that to adjust, you can start to see where I just used that mono eraser just to pull that hair out. You can add these little tiny wispy bits. There's another one, there was one where I've just put that one on the drawing, and there's another one further over. It's about up here somewhere, which comes down to this white space here, which curls back into this hairline. So you can create the illusion of very, very detailed illusions where there really isn't much detail. It's just one strand of one hair, giving the illusion that you've done loads of hair on top of all of the structures and things. I think this was leaning over too far. I think this is straighter here. It's this dark mark. And it's much darker on the other side as well. Put these dark marks in will make this appear too light again, so it's interesting this back and forth of putting tone down and taking it off and put it back down again. You're kind of building up. It's one of three-dimensionality too. Layering up the charcoal on a two-dimensional surface, giving the illusion of 3 dimensions. Just using the point to pull around this. There's a sharper, crisper bit to that bridge of the nose. It's helped me figure out that this still comes down here a little bit further to give this bottom part of the eye space before it comes across and out and down this way, and then back down this way. So even now, kind of redefining that, so you can start to see how that eye form is really built up. This disappears into the shadow a little bit as well. I'll pull the shadow down. Zoom back, you'll be able to get more. So obviously this is the kind of structural process. We can almost take this for a walk all the way through the sketch today. I mean, this isn't, again, no way near finished, but and this must be frustrating for you that I never seem to finish anything, but you can get from this very sculptural way in which we started off, this very loose but measured mark making technique, where we can start to see, you know, where darknesses and lights are placed in the drawing. You know, where you start to see where dark edges are by large marks. We measured off lightly to begin with just to get the whole shape of it, but as we started to fill in and put elements into the drawing, even sculpturally, you know, blocking in large areas, play around with how light can kind of give the illusion of where that hairlight is. Another bit comes out here, another bit comes down this way. We're putting these very expressive marks in. It's kind of fun to draw. And again, we are trying to copy these loose, free-flowing marks from a drawing that's already been done. But if you have a go yourself and draw the drawing, say from the Portrait Artist of the Year tomorrow, if you did a 20-minute or half an hour sketch in this style, you'd have, you know, some basic ideas where the forms are. And then if you spent the next 20 minutes just considering the placement of large form and then put the expressive marks on top of it, you'd start to really get close to what the likeness is, because you'd have a good understanding of the shape, the big forms, a good understanding of where large shadow shapes are falling, and then you can start to refine them. Then you can start to put in expressive marks. Once you've got sort of the basic shape of things and the basic shape of where the form of a object is, you'll get a closer representation of likeness, definitely. You know, I can play around with that shadow all day long. I'm not going to worry about it not being perfect straight away. So just takes the pressure off and start playing around with how that hair mark should be over this way and how it comes out this way, and it disappears lightly into that bit. This is all in shadow, so there shouldn't be any light bits here, so I can get rid of all this bit here. Make this darker, make this darker. If I start to make this darker, it will tie in with this eye, and we'll start to believe that this head is actually a solid shape that comes around. You know, if we start to fill in this blackness all the way through, you know, it's quite light here. I've not really gone over it too many times just to save on time. We get a real sense of the length and depth of the hair that comes down. You know, it sculpts down this way. You can really see it. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. You know, a bit of fun today. It's a little bit different. It's been much looser. I've not been worried about the details. I'm starting to get similarities happening, which I can develop and refine and build upon, but whilst keeping that lovely free, loose quality to some of the drawings. This mouth needs to come up here in the dark a lot more. You see it's all dark up here, whereas this is way too light. Which will help me give the illusion of the head turning around this way, from the light to the dark. You know, the shadow maybe a little bit too far back. I can move it across here a little bit more and put it down here. So there's lots of areas. So I'm kind of looking at the screen and my drawing at the same time. So there's lots of areas that I can still refine and develop. So I think that comes that way a little bit more. I think all of these shadows, from the shadow that comes out up here, which gives the underside of the cheek, all of this is in a little bit more darkness. So I could cover the whole lot. Even just doing that turned that a little bit more. You see where the shadow shape comes out here. The side of the head as it comes around this way. As it comes in towards the light, it gets lighter. There's an element here which is coming across this way. See that? the shadow shape for this nose is much sharper down here, so all of this is in shadow. There's a darker shadow which comes down to here from the corner of the nose down to the corner of the mouth, which is back in this darkness down here. And then I can see from about that point it comes up this way. You see that? So again, building up on shadows, building up on layers and layers and layers, you'll definitely get a more solid three-dimensional form occurring. Do you have to spray to fix it? Something when finished, so it doesn't smudge. Normally, if I'm keeping it, what I'll do is I put it between a couple of layers of what are called graphene paper, greaseproof paper basically, and that'll stop the smudging transferring onto another page if it was in a sketchbook. I don't tend to use hairsprays and fixative sprays because it tends to kind of melt the charcoal into the surface and you lose some definition in drawing. I just feel it kind of, you're almost blowing some of the charcoal away from the surface as well from the spray, but the solution itself can kind of soak the graphite into the page, so I don't tend to use an awful lot. What I have used in the past is a really cheap hairspray because it's a fine mist. I don't spray it directly onto the page really closely. I kind of give it a fine mist so it kind of falls on it lightly. The force of the spray coming out sometimes can disrupt the charcoal on the surface and blow parts out, but it can also spit parts of the fixative onto the page and it ends up like being little oil spots all over. So I don't tend to. I tend just to put another piece of glassine paper over the top of it and then stick it in the folio. I'll leave it there. Once it's framed in behind the glass, it's not going to smudge. So as long as you're protecting the surface where you're storing it before taking it to frame as for exhibition or whatever, it should be fine. It should be fine. You shouldn't get any smudges. Do be careful, obviously, how you're handling it. Greasy fingers on the page will create grease spots. Charcoal and graphite love that, and it will create sort of greasy spots areas. That's why I was drawing with a drawing glove today. So all these marks that I've got on the page that I've accidentally put on, I can rub off without the worry that they're going to be sort of absorbed into the paper surface. Yeah, so that'll be it. So what are we at now? 4:15. It's roughly about 2 hours. Again, sorry it's not finished, but you could see from beginning to end where we're going with this. And again, it's a wonderful book. I'll put details of the book in the show notes, so you can come and check that out as well as any materials and bits and pieces that I've used today. Hopefully that'll help you. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, guys, if there's anything you want me to cover, let me know, and I'll definitely get into that. I can't stop drawing this now because I've got really into it. I could play with this all day. But I'll be there tomorrow as well. I'll be doing the Sky Portrait Artist of the Week on Sky TV Facebook page. It is run by the Sky Arts of the crew, so you've got all of the judgmentals there. So you've got Tajan Schoenberg, you've got Kathleen Serrano, and you've got Kate Brain Freeze. What's her second name? I should know. How have I forgotten her second name? Do you know? Right, can anybody remember Kate's second name? Begins with a B. I have to look it up now. It's going to frustrate me if I don't say it. Yes, thank you, Desiree. Thank you, Alex. Thanks for everybody today. Draw Mode, thank you for all your comments as well. Julian Out Draws, you subbed. Cool. Thank you very much. Hat Draws. I come from Draw Mode. Draw Mode, thank you very much, guys. Alex and Desiree, maybe want to pop over to Draw Mode as well and check him out. Angela, thank you very much as well for being here. Doopy Doody, there's some great names today. Thanks for being here. It's been awesome. Kate, is it Bryant? I just want to get Kate's name because if I'm forgetting it, it's going to drive me nuts. So I'm going to go onto my Instagram account now and just double check that. Sure, it's Kate Bryant. I knew it was. Yes, Judgmental. It's really interesting to hear what their take is from their selection of the Sky Portrait Artist of the Week. The discussion's always good. There's loads of people, a couple of thousand people watch it and are also posting up as well. So reading the comments is quite interesting as well. And from where people are doing it from all over the world. So guys, thank you again. It's been so much fun. I shall see you again this time again next week. So 2 o'clock UK time. If you're somewhere else and you're watching it at a later stage, don't worry. You can still type your comments in. I will get them and I will get back to you and hopefully answer them all as well. Thank you so much again. See you next week. 2 o'clock ArtCat. See you then. I've got to find the off button now. There we are. See you later. Thanks very much. Bye bye. No, it hasn't. It says hide agenda. It's still on. Hang on a second.